knew a lot about how to survive, but we shall come to this later. Elizabeth had a daughter, Calla Rose. Calla comes to play quite a substantial part in this story, but right now we must stay with Elizabeth. Trust me on this. A girl with bright yellow hair and 3 freckles that resembled the precise outline of a mallard's tertial feather. And it was just the 2 of them against the world. In the brief moments she could think clearly enough to work, Elizabeth did it in the only way she knew how. She wrote articles and books and sold the clothes off her own back and kept the 2 of them together and afloat and alive. It was not an easy life, and it was often one that took them away from the world. On the rare times that Elizabeth spoke to people, or that people spoke to her, they would think of her as a strange and eccentric woman, and never talk to her again. Those people are idiots. Elizabeth North was one of the bravest and strongest women in the entire world. And I am going to tell you why. Chapter 3. A temporarily wonderful childhood. The young Elizabeth lived with her parents in a big house in the countryside. Although she was an only child, she did not grow up alone. She had a dog that was so large and brown that he really was more lion than dog. His name was Aslan, and when Elizabeth went to school, he would sit quietly at the front door and not move until he saw her coming back up the drive. Elizabeth's parents spoilt her deliberately and happily. They lived for the moment, and her childhood was as perfectly formed as the diamonds on her mum's wedding ring. She would have chocolate cake for breakfast and ice cream for supper, before going to bed at midnight and watching fireworks outside the window. And on the days when there were no fireworks and just the distant pink of a setting sun, Elizabeth would sit outside and think about how much she loved her life. It was a strange thing for a child to think, but Elizabeth North was a strange child who lived a strange life. She went to school, of course, and mixed with other children, but the school was down in the village and not the sort of school that you and I might even recognise as a school. It was 2 rooms, and the older children sat in one, and the younger children sat in the other, and Elizabeth was sent between the 2 rooms because there was nobody else her age. Sometimes, when she was sent from one room to the other, she would wander outside instead and feed the birds with the spare crumbs from her pockets. On one Friday in July, when it was almost the end of term and everybody was thinking about the school holidays, the little ones were allowed to do colouring in, but the older ones had to do maths. Elizabeth didn't want to do either, so was on her way to slip outside. She had gone precisely 3 steps when Mrs. Fraser, her tall and sensible teacher, stopped her. "Maths," said Mrs. Fraser. "You need to brush up on your times tables." "But that's not fair," said Elizabeth, folding her arms. Mrs. Fraser didn't look concerned in the slightest. Mrs. Fraser was excellent at appearing unconcerned, and I think we can all learn something from her. "Life isn't fair, Elizabeth. You'll be doing maths this afternoon, and if you continue with this attitude, you'll be staying behind and doing extra. I am quite happy to do my knitting while you do some more sums. I imagine it will be educational for us both." "You have no jurisdiction on me after school." This is a fancy word that means authority. Elizabeth had learnt it only 2 days ago after hearing it on the TV, and felt that this was the perfect time to practice it. Said Elizabeth. It was somewhat inevitable that Mrs. Fraser thought the opposite. She kept Elizabeth in detention that very day, and straight after the last little one had been picked up by their parents, spent the next hour drilling Elizabeth on why X plus Y.